Okay, live again, reading chapter 6 from Crime Punishment. Let's go. Chapter 6 The Seeds of Obsession. Much later, Paul learned that the main truth behind what was like, wait a second. Much later, Raskolnikov learned the mundane truth behind the huckster's invitation to Elizaveta, or the standard business referral involving a bankrupt family looking to offload household goods. There was no grand conspiracy, just the usual, unremarkable business of a timid, honest woman who worked hard for her meager living. But Raskolnikov's mind had drifted into a dangerous, superstitious orbit. He began to see his life not as a series of random events, but as a path paved by ominous coincidences. He recalled the previous winter, when a student named Poporev had casually given him the address of the pawnbroker, Alyona Ivanovna. He hadn't needed her then, but 6 weeks ago he remembered it. He'd found his father's silver watch and his sister's gold ring. That first encounter had left him with a visceral, irrational hatred for the old woman. Following that, he had sat in a table, and by pure chance, a student and an officer sat at the next table. The student spoke of Alona with bitter contempt, detailing her grief, her cruelty, and her miserable treatment of her half sister, Elizaveta. He recounted how the old woman had bitten Elizaveta's finger out of spite. The student's talk turned toward a cold philosophical proposition. On one side, we have a stupid, senseless, worthless, spiteful, ailing, horrid old woman. On the other side, fresh young lives thrown away for want of health. Kill her, kill her, take her money, and with the help of it, devote oneself to the service of humanity. It's simple arithmetic. The officer dismissed the idea as mere nature, but the student argued for correcting nature. When asked if he would actually commit such a murder himself, the student backed down, laughing it off as mere theorizing. But Raskolnikov, listening from a few feet away, had been violently agitated. He couldn't shake the feeling that this conversation was a preordained sign, a guiding hint from fate itself. The feverish calmed down. Returning from the Haymarket, Raskolnikov collapsed in onto his sofa, falling into a leaden, dreamless sleep that lasted until the next morning. When Nastasia, his landlady's helper, checked on him, she found him unresponsive, pale, and sick. He lay for hours in a daze, haunted by a recurring vision of an Egyptian oasis, a cool, refreshing spring of blue, cold water, until the sound of clock striking snapped him back to reality. He realized in panic that it was past 6 o'clock. The sluggishness was gone. replaced by a frantic high stakes efficiency. The nose. He scavenged an old unwashed shirt, tore a strip of fabric, and sewed a concealed loop into the inside of his overcoat. अपने कोट में एक सिगरेट जेब बना ली, यही कहना चाहते हैं. जस्ट अंडर द लेफ्ट आर्म होल, अच्छा, यहाँ पे. It was a clever, precise device designed to hold the axe handle securely against his body so it remained hidden. The pledge. He took a plain piece of wood, attached a small strip of iron for weight, and wrapped it in a clean white paper tied with a precise knot. It was a fake, a decoy designed to force the old woman to fumble with the wrapping, buying him the precious seconds he would need. When he finally heard the chime, 6 o'clock, he moved with the silent, predatory stealth of a cat. The fatal opportunity. Everything hinged on the axe, which he had planned to steal from the kitchen. When he reached the kitchen, his heart sank. Nastasia was there, hanging laundry. The window of opportunity seemed to have slammed shut. What made me think why she would be sure not to be at home? He thought, overwhelmed by a wave of humiliated animal rage. But as he stood near the porter's lodge, looking for an exit, he saw it, an axe left under a bench. In a flash, he grabbed it, secured it in his hidden noose, and shoved his hands into his pockets. When reason fails, devil helps. He thought, a strange grim smile on his face. The final approach. He walked toward the pawnbroker's house with a strange dissociative calm. His mind, instead of focusing on the impending murder, obsessed over irrelevant trivia, the construction of city fountains, the urban planning of summer garden, and why people choose to live in the dirtiest part of town. So probably men led to execution clutch mentally at every object that meets them on the way, he thought. But he dismissed the realization instantly. He arrived at the house, a hay wagon pulling into the gate shielded him perfectly. He slipped into the yard and ascended the stairs. The building was quiet, save for some painters working on a lower floor. He reached the fourth story. He stood before her door. For a flickering moment, the thought, shall I go back? Crossed his mind, but he didn't answer it. He listened. There was a dead silence inside. He rang the bell, no answer. He rang again, louder. Then he heard it, the soft, cautious rustle of a skirt and delicate metallic click of a hand touching the lock from the inside. She was there, listening on her side of the door, just as he was on his. He rang a third time, soberly, without impatience, a feat of cunning that would haunt his memory forever. A moment later, the latch clicked open. Okay, chapter 6 ended so fast, I don't realize that it was so short. चलो नेक्स्ट चैप्टर करते हैं भाई. ये खोला मैंने क्राइम एंड पनिशमेंट की वेबसाइट. यहाँ से देखा जी चैप्टर 7. इसको करा कॉपी यहाँ से. कॉपी इट. इसको करो जेमिनाई or say to Gemini that I'm giving you the text from Crime and Punishment book. I want to read it fully without any loose of wording. Just replace the complex words in this text with, with simple and understandable words. Do not trim its length. Length should be similar to the original. Make it understandable. If possible, add like labels who is saying to whom. Okay, post it. Process it, process it, process it. ये वाला बढ़िया भाई. And copy it. यहाँ पे paste. Start the prompt on. Put it. क्या हो रहा भाई? क्या हो रहा भाई? ये सी. Chapter 7 starts here. The door was, as before, opened a tiny crack, and again two sharp and suspicious eyes stared at him out of the darkness. Then Raskolnikov lost his head and nearly made a great mistake, fearing the old woman would be frightened by their being alone, and not hoping that the sight of him would calm her suspicions. He took hold of the door and pulled it towards him to prevent the old woman from trying to shut it again. Seeing this, she did not pull the door back, but she did not let go the handle so that he almost dragged her out with it on the stairs. Seeing that she was standing in the doorway, not allowing him to pass, he moved straight toward her. She stepped back in alarm, tried to say something, but seemed unable to speak and stared with wide open eyes at him. Raskolnikov, good evening, hello, I know, he began, trying to speak easily, but his voice would not obey him. It broke and shook. I have come. I have brought something, but you'd better come in to the light. and leaving her, he passed straight into the room without being invited. The old woman ran after him. Her tongue was suddenly loosened. Ayola Ivanova. Good heavens, what is it? Who is it? What do you want? Raskolnikov. Why? Well, Aleona Ivanovna, you know me. Raskolnikov here. Here, I brought you the item to pawn that I promised the other day. And he held out the object. The old woman glanced for a moment at the item, but at once stared into the eyes of her uninvited visitor. She looked intensely, nastily, and distrustfully. A minute passed. He even imagined something like a smirk in her eyes, as though she had already guessed everything. He felt that he was losing his mind, that he was almost terrified. So terrified that if she were to look like that and not say a word for another half minute, he thought he would have run away from her. Raskolnikov, why do you look at me as though you did not know me? He said suddenly, also with anger. Take it if you like. If not, I'll go elsewhere. I'm in a hurry. Hurry. He had not even thought of saying this, but it was suddenly said on its own. The old woman recovered herself, and her visitor's firm tone clearly brought back her confidence. Eleona Ivanova. But why, my good sir, all of a sudden, what is it? She asked, looking at the pawned item. Raskolnikov, the silver cigarette case. I spoke of it last time, you know. She held out her hand. Aloha, Ivanova said. But how pale you are, to be sure, and your hands are trembling too. Have you been swimming or what? Raskolnikov, fever, he answered shortly. You can't help getting pale. If you have nothing to eat, he added, with difficulty pronouncing the words. His strength was failing him again, but his answer sounded like the truth. The old woman took the item. Alyona Ivanovna, what is it? She asked once more, inspecting Raskolnikov closely and weighing the item in her hand. Like that. Raskolnikov, a thing, cigarette case, silver. Look at it. Alyona Ivanovna. It doesn't seem somehow like silver. How he has wrapped it up. Trying to unite the string and turning to the window, to the light. All her windows were shut in spite of suffocating heat. She left him completely for some seconds and stood with her back to him. He unbuttoned his coat and freed the axe from the loop, but did not yet take it out completely, simply holding it in his right hand under the coat. His hands were terribly weak. He felt them every moment growing more numb and more wooden. He was afraid he would let the axe slip and fall. A sudden dizziness came over him. Alyona Ivanovna, but what has he tied up like this for? But what has he tied it up like this for? The old woman cried with annoyance and moved toward him. He had not a minute more to lose. He pulled the axe all the way out, swung it with both arms, barely aware of himself, and almost without effort, almost automatically, brought the dull side down on her head. He seemed not to use his own strength in this, but as soon as he had once brought the axe down, his strength returned to him. The old woman was, as always, bareheaded. Her thin, light hair, mixed with grey, heavily smeared with grease, was braided in a thin tail and fastened by a broken horn comb which stood out on the back of her neck. As she was so short, the blow fell on the very top of her skull. She cried out, but very softly, and suddenly collapsed all in a heap on the floor. Raising her hands to her head, in one hand she still held the pawned item. Then he dealt her another and another blow with the dull side, and on the same spot the blood gushed as if from an overturned glass. The body fell back. He stepped back, let it fall, and at once bent over her face. She was dead. Her eyes seemed to be bursting out of their sockets. The forehead and the whole face were twisted and twitching violently. He laid the axe on the ground near the dead body and searched at once in her pocket, trying to avoid the bleeding body. The same right hand pocket from which she had taken the key his last visit, he was in full control of his mind, free from confusion or dizziness. But his hands were still trembling. He remembered afterward that he had been particularly focused and careful, trying all the time not to get smeared with blood. He pulled out the keys at once. They were all as before, in one bunch on a steel ring. Wait, wait, wait. Hmm. Oh, oh, oh. It was a very small room. No, no. He ran at once into the bedroom with them. It was a very small room with a whole display of holy religious items, images. Against the other wall stood a big bed, very clean and covered with a silk patchwork stuffed quilt. Against a third wall was a chest of drawers. Strange to say, as soon as he began to fit the keys into the chest, as soon as he heard their jingling, a violent shudder passed over him. He suddenly felt a temptation again to give it all up and go away. But that was only for an instant. It was too late to go back. He actually smiled at himself when suddenly another terrifying idea came to his mind. He suddenly imagined that the old woman might be still alive and might regain consciousness. Leaving the keys in the chest, he ran back to the body, snatched up the axe, and lifted it once more over the old woman, but did not bring it down. There was no doubt that she was dead. Bending down and examining her again more closely, he saw clearly that the skull was broken and even smashed in on her one side. He was about to feel it with his finger, but pulled back his hand, and indeed, it was obvious without doing that. Meanwhile, there was a complete pool of blood. All at once, he noticed a string on her neck. He yanked at it, but the string was strong and did not snap, and besides, it was soaked with blood. He tried to pull it out from the front of the dress, but something held it and prevented it from coming. In his impatience, he raised the axe again to cut the string from above on the body, but did not dare, and with difficulty, letting his hand and the axe dirty in the blood. After 2 minutes, hurried effort, he cut the string and took it off without touching the body with the axe. He was not mistaken, it was a purse. On the string were two crosses, one of cypress wood and one of copper, and an image of delicate silver woodwork, and with them a small greasy, soft leather purse with a steel rim and ring. The purse was stuffed very full. Raskolnikov shoved it into his pocket without looking at it, threw the crosses on the old woman's body, and rushed back into the bedroom, this time taking the axe with him. He was in a terrible hurry. He grabbed the keys and began trying them again. But he was unsuccessful. They would not fit in the locks. It was not so much that his hands were shaking, but that he kept making mistakes. Though he saw, for example, that a key was not the right one and would not fit, still he tried to force it in. Suddenly he remembered and realized that the big key with the deep cuts, which was hanging there with the small keys, could not possibly belong to the chest of drawers. On his last visit, this had occurred to him, but to some strong safe box, and that everything perhaps was hidden in that box, he left the chest of drawers and at once searched under the bed frame, knowing that old women usually keep boxes under their beds. And so it was. There was a good sized box under the bed, about 3 feet long, with a curved lid covered with red leather and decorated with steel nails. The cut key fitted at once and unlocked it. At the top, under a white sheet, was a coat of shiny red fabric lined with hair fur. Under it was a silk dress, then a shawl, and it seemed as though there was nothing below the clothes. The first thing he did was to wipe his blood-stained hands on the red coat. It's red, and on red, blood will be less noticeable. The thought passed through his mind. Then he suddenly snapped out of it. Good God, am I losing my mind? He thought with terror. But no sooner did he touch the clothes with a gold watch slipped from under the fur coat. He hurried to flip them all over. There turned out to be various items made of gold among the clothes, probably all pawned objects, unbought or waiting to be bought back. Bracelets, chains, earrings, pins, and such things. Some were in cases, others were simply wrapped in newspaper, carefully and neatly folded and tied around with string. Without any delay, he began filling up the pockets of his trousers and overcoat without examining or opening the packages and cases. But he did not have time to take many. He suddenly heard steps in the room where the old woman lay. He stopped instantly and was as still as death, but all was quiet. So it must have been his imagination. All at once, he heard distinctly a faint cry, as though someone had made a low, broken groan. Then again, dead silence for a minute or two. He sat crouching on his heels by the box and waited, holding his breath. Suddenly, he jumped up, grabbed the axe, and ran out of the bedroom. In the middle of the room stood Lizaveta with a big bundle in her arms. She was staring in total shock at her murdered sister, white as a sheet and seeming not to have the strength to cry out. Seeing him run out of the bedroom, she began faintly trembling all over like a leaf. A shudder ran down her face. She lifted her hand, opened her mouth, but still did not scream. She began slowly backing away from him into the corner, staring intensely, unblinkingly at him, but still made no sound, as though she could not catch her breath to scream. He rushed at her with the axe. Her mouth twitched miserably, as one sees babies' mouths do when they begin to frighten, stare intensely at what scares them, and are on the verge of crying. And this unfortunate Lizaveta was so simple and had been so truly broken and scared that she did not even raise her hand to protect her face, though that was the most necessary and natural action at that moment. For the axe was raised over her face. She only put up her empty left hand, but not to her face, slowly holding it out before her as though waving him away. The axe fell with the sharp edge right on the skull and split at one blow all top of her head. She fell heavily at once. Raskolnikov completely lost his mind. Wrapping up her bundle, Grabbing up her bundle, he dropped it again and ran into the hallway. Fear gained, Fear gained more and more control over him, especially after the second completely unexpected murder. He desperately wanted to run away from the place as fast as possible. And if at that moment he had been capable of seeing and thinking more clearly, if he had been able to realize all the difficulties of this situation, the hopelessness, the ugliness, and the ridiculousness of it, if he would have understood how many barriers and perhaps crimes he had still to overcome or to commit to get out of that place and to make his way home, it is very possible that he would have thrown up everything and would have gone to turn himself in, and not from fear, but from simple horror and disgust at what he had done. The feeling of disgust especially welled up within him and grew stronger every minute. He would not now have gone to the box or even to the room for anything in the world, but a sort of mental blankness, even dreaminess, had begun by degrees to take control of him. At moments, he forgot himself, or rather, forgot what was important, and focused on trivial things. Looking, however, into the kitchen and seeing a bucket half full of water on a bench, he thought of washing his hands and the axe. His hands were sticky with blood. He dropped the axe with the blade in the water, snatched a piece of soap that lay in a broken saucer on the window, and began washing his hands in the bucket. When they were clean, he took out the axe, washed the blade, and spent a long time, about 3 minutes, washing the wood where there were spots of blood, rubbing them with soap. Then